Once there was a king who had a kingdom, and one day the king decided to have a contest. Whoever could fill a barn of his in one day before the sun set would receive untold riches and gold. Now, before I continue this story, I must weave in another story into this story. In December of last year, I decided to come from Mexico and come and celebrate my birthday with Manouso Manos. Until a few moments ago, Manouso did not know this fact. And I remember that first Friday evening we sat in Dandasana as Manouso shouted out, sit up straight, sit up tall, push your thighs down, bring your thighs into the ground. My thighs tried to look compliant. They didn't fool Manouso. And then I understood that evening why, when I told my friends that I was going to do a workshop with Manouso Manos, they looked at me and said, do you know what you're getting yourself into? Are you prepared? And I said, what could it be? It's yoga. Peace, love, tie-dye. And as the evening went on and I heard the shouts and the screams and the swearing and the moans and the groans, these were all coming from inside of me, I realized that my yoga was going to change completely. The next morning, we stood in Tadasana, and Manouso presented us with one of my favorite things. No, it wasn't the double espresso and the chocolate croissant. Instead, it was a story. Manouso told us the story of the Iyengars on the cusp of their birthdays. And by the end of that weekend, I knew that life as it was known to me was going to be different. When I left Los Angeles and I went to the Bahamas to see my family, and I did my daily yoga practice, Manouso was there with me, on my shoulder, at my side, behind my back, protecting my asanas. And so I decided to do what any sane person would do. I canceled my ticket to go back to Mexico. And instead I came back to do another workshop with Manouso. After all, turnabout is fair play. If I could spend my birthday with him, I could spend his birthday celebration with me. And as I thought of what I wanted to present to Manouso on this great occasion of his 60th birthday, I was reminded of this story. So there was that king who gave a contest. Whoever could fill a barn of his in one day before the setting of the sun would receive untold riches and gold. There was a man who had 3 children, 2 boys and a girl. And the oldest son decided he would take this contest. And so, in the morning, he got up at the crack of dawn, and he went to the barn. He began to fill the barn with firewood. He worked all day long, and people gathered to wait and see what would happen. And by the time the sun set, the barn was only half full. The second day, the second son, a strong, strapping young fellow, decided he would go and he would fill the barn with hay. He began, at the crack of dawn, he began to fill that barn, and all throughout the day, as people stood around watching and cheering him on, he worked hard. But by the end of the day, by the time the sun set, the barn was only 3/4 full. On the third day, the young woman decided that she would go to fill the barn. She did not get up at the crack of dawn, but she got up at a reasonable hour. She pulled out her yoga mat and stood in Tadasana, because we all know that that is one of the most important poses in yoga. And after her yoga practice, she had lunch with a lunch of field greens from the back garden. Organic greens, that is. And then finally, in the afternoon, she did not rush to the barn, but she sauntered over. She sat outside and looked up in the sky at the clouds. She did her Supta Virasana, because we all know that if Supta Virasana is not in your yoga practice daily, you do not have a yoga practice. And finally, as the sun began to set, and people stood around nervously watching to see what she would do, the young woman entered the barn. From her pocket, she pulled out a candle. And as she lit that candle, the light of the candle illuminated the barn. And the barn was filled with light. Thank you, Manouso, for the light.